I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's August 19th, 2025. The U.S. Department of Justice and the Maryland State Board of Elections tussle over access to the state's voter list. Montgomery County Council is looking at removing a provision in the new gas leaf blower ban law that requires residents take pictures of others using gas blowers when making complaints. The county council faces a First Amendment challenge from a local satirical blog and more. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by the Political Science Program at UMBC Shady Grove, where you'll learn a strong foundation in public policy, pre-law, and international affairs for an impactful career in a number of essential areas. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
She got a face that you can't read, like it was chiseled there in stone. Shows all the pain, the troubles she has known.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning, precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from DC area roots band, The Longtimers. Tom Clifford on vocals and guitar, Ben Holmes on drums and vocals, Mo Nelson on upright bass and vocals, and Pete Rose on guitars and vocals. You can find them at Hank Dietl's Tavern, on Rockville Pike, and other musical establishments in the area.
From each time she got burned, she can't tell you nothing about love. She don't know what it's like to be cared for. She's got all the answers till you ask her about love. No one's ever loved a girl before. Nobody.
Last month in July, the Trump administration's Department of Justice wrote a letter to the State Board of Elections in Maryland asking for the state's full voter list and insinuating the presence of ineligible names on the list. Jared DeMaranis is the chief election officer in Maryland.
The DOJ has engaged all my counterparts throughout the nation. They've asked us about our list maintenance procedures to make sure that the voter rolls are up to date. And they also have asked for the entire voter list of over 4 million registered voters in the state of Maryland. The DOJ does not have legal authority over our list maintenance procedures here. DOJ had followed up and requested the list again. They've submitted an application, at which point we sent a follow-up letter to the DOJ requesting what their purpose is with the said list. Maryland has a law which prohibits the distribution of the voter registration list for commercial purposes. It had to be for electoral purposes, so we just want to clarify what their use of that role is, because nationally they've been saying things like we're looking for undocumented or illegal citizens voting or deporting them, which would be outside of electoral purposes.
So Maryland law prohibits use of the list for commercial purposes. Your letter comes from the voting section of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. They may say that the Maryland law prohibiting commercial use does not apply to them.
They still have to have the second part, which is it has to have electoral purpose.
When the DOJ sent the letter, were they not clear about their intent. Can you read into the intent to say that they are trying to validate voter rolls?
I don't think that they explicitly said their intent. That's why we asked for the clarifying follow-up letter.
The DOJ letter does say that there were 6 million or more registration transactions in the system that you maintain, but the total number of voters is just over 4 million. So they believe that some of these transactions may be fraudulent or something. That's, I think, the implication. Can you explain why the number of transactions may be more than the number of voters?
We're an automatic voter registration state. Every time an individual goes to the motor vehicles, we get updates from them. It could just be renewals or anything like that. So nothing could occur, but we still get a transaction. So that's the difference here.
The other thing that the DOJ letter says is that they are concerned that Maryland's 95% voter registration number is too high. What is a proper threshold to understand? What should it be?
I got to say, my goal, I want 100% voter participation. That's a good thing. I was kind of floored by the fact that, no, there's enough apathy out there, so you should be much, much lower with your voter registration figures. Any
database, especially large database, has errors. I assume you do audits. What is your error rate?
0.006% or something like that. There was 200 something voters out of 4 million there.
The DOJ letter uses the National Voter Registration Act to justify its ask. Generally, we find that when in conflict, federal law supersedes state law. But in this case, you are saying it does not.
There is the NVRA, the National Voter Registration Act, and there's HAVA out there. When they applied those laws to this certain situation here, it was a misinterpretation of it. You don't have the right then to have access to the list. You have the right to make sure that the processes and that the list maintenance procedures are accurate and correct. Now, some people interpret it as saying, well, the only way to do that is get the list so I can verify it. But that's not what the words say. If the federal law said that they had access to the list, that would be a different story here. But that's why states have access and control over the actual processes of elections. So this is a little bit of I think, sleight of hand, but they do have a right under state law to, like I said, under the Public Information Act requests, which we then supplied that information under.
As a resident of Maryland, I could ask for the voter list for electoral purposes. It seems that the DOJ has filed a request under your usual procedure of getting the voter list, which is, actually there's a process for giving it out. So can you explain the process for giving it out and why that may or may not apply to the DOJ, but I could do it?
A Maryland registered voter, the political parties, the usual suspects for people that want to get involved in electoral purposes here. Yes, they have to fill out an application. There's an oath that says it will not be used for commercial purposes, that it will be only used for electoral purposes. Additionally, we've now put in there making sure that you can't use this list to intimidate or harass voters, and that you pay the fee to get the list. DOJ, because they're a federal agency, there's a federal law which talks about privacy and that they have to tell us why they're using the list.
If I got the list and misused it in any way, what remedies do you have, and do those remedies apply to the DOJ?
We receive complaints that this list might be misused for a commercial purpose. They would go to the state prosecutor's office, which is an independent agency outside of the office of the Attorney General that's charged with investigating and enforcing election laws. The Office of the State Prosecutor has both civil and criminal penalties at its disposal.
So you would be able to hold individual federal officials of the Department of Justice liable under this?
I would defer to the state prosecutor's office on that question there.
Jared DeMarinis, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Much time making love to everyone else. She never took the time off to find love for herself. But you light another cigarette. Slowly shake her.
One of the biggest political shockers in the state of Maryland this year was Governor Moore's decision to veto a widely supported reparations bill. Delegate Alethea McCaskill was the bill's sponsor on the House side. And finally, I was able to speak with her to get her side of the story.
Listen, I just told the governor, this is a miscalculation on you if you don't sign it because we didn't talk veto. But however, when I got the call from him that he was planning, he was going to veto it, I told him then again that I am ashamed that this is happening on his watch. I am in total shock and that we're just going to push for an override. And at this point, we are ready and safe. The draft of the executive order was to do the same thing we want to do. So that's why the veto just does not make sense. Folks are wondering if they can't trust the governor on this, then how can we move forward with allowing him to be our president?
To listen to my full interview with Delegate Alethea McCaskill, including on the political fallout of the veto, tune in to our Friday feature episode this week.
Hoping you'll hold on to every word she said. But she can't tell you nothing about love.
As you may know, Montgomery County has a new law banning the use of gas-powered leaf blowers in the jurisdiction that went into full force this July 1st and now includes commercial landscapers. Enforcement of the law is based on citizen complaints, and the law required those complaining to take pictures of offending gas blower users, a neighbor, or a commercial landscaper, and then use that picture to report the violation. This provision is raising concerns, especially as it increases vulnerability of the mostly Latino landscaping workforce. Councilmember Gabe Albornoz has opposed the law for many reasons, and most recently sought a 3-month fall season exemption to allow commercial landscapers a longer compliance runway. I asked him what happened to his exemption proposal.
2 weeks ago, we did have a committee session, and it was voted down 2-1 in committee. It did not advance, but one of the provisions of the current law, there was universal concern expressed not just by the committee, but by the council at large, and that is that it's written into the legislation that in order to enforce the legislation, it requires that residents take photographs or video evidence of people who are using gas-powered leaf blowers, and then that evidence be submitted to the Department of Environmental Protection so that they can follow up. It's literally required in the law. And obviously, under the current environment that we are in, encouraging county residents to take pictures or images of what is predominantly immigrants that work in this field is a recipe for disaster. And so there were questions about various options, and there aren't very many good options. The options are either just simply don't enforce the law, which seems, counterintuitive to the people who were supportive of this to begin with, or amend the legislation to take out that provision. And so that's likely the path that we're going to take. I had suggested that we use the legislation that's currently on the books as a vehicle to do that. But there's some concern expressed by colleagues, and I can understand where they're coming from, that this issue has been litigated so much that it doesn't make sense to use the current legislation as a path to address this one very important issue. So the council staff is in the process of evaluating in partnership with the executive branch, some options, and they're supposed to be presenting us with options when we come back from recess. We'll see what they come up with.
The council is not planning to change the gas leaf blower ban law, but rather do something else that then invalidates a portion of the law, which is the reporting requirement?
There is interest in, obviously carrying forward with the ban, but the manner in which it's enforced is something that is still being debated.
What are the options?
I think the option is reintroduction of a bill that includes all of the various elements of the ban, but eliminates the provision requiring video or picture evidence. That's going to have to be taken out. But the ban will remain in place, and DEP will continue to enforce it. It could be based on, phone calls, alerting them that this is happening. But there won't be a requirement that there be video or photographic evidence for them to be able to enforce.
You had said that commercial landscapers are not quite ready because of how much batteries cost, what the setup is. It seems that it is still legal to put a diesel generator on a truck in order to charge those batteries in real time as the landscaper moves from neighborhood to neighborhood. And that completely defeats the entire purpose because the diesel generator is loud, it is polluting. Are you going to fix that part too in the new bill?
No, I don't believe that will be the case. We're going to see what we've seen in the District of Columbia, which is, you are going to have a number of gas generators on the backs of these trucks. The other thing that was told to us by DEP as well, that in DC, they will plug into people's homes while they're in a neighborhood. They'll use somebody's house to charge. We're seeing on average, according to DEP, around 6 complaints per day right now, which is not a lot. Now, this is obviously not the busy season. That will be in the fall.
Can I ask you a philosophical question, which is, why do we make laws that are hard to enforce? Why isn't enforcement at the heart of lawmaking rather than sort of an afterthought?
I worked in the executive branch for 12 years, and I saw firsthand what essentially amounts to an unfunded mandate. The easier part is to draft the legislation, but I don't think we take enforcement into account enough, because we enact these well-intentioned laws, but then we don't have the staff in place to actually be able to enforce them. And that happens quite often.
It's more than just unfunded mandate. You're not just imposing cost, but you're making this law. When you do that, the law gets enforced against one person, but not against another. People will say the law is applied unfairly.
And then you add the layer. The municipalities are exempt from the gas-powered leaf blower law. So Rockville, Gaithersburg doesn't have a ban, but the rest of the county does, which leads to additional confusion. I really worry that it's like the perfect negative storm coming up this October, that many of these landscaping companies will continue to use gas-powered leaf blowers because they don't have very many other viable options, which is going to frustrate a number of members in the community. And they're going to be calling this number left and right without DEP's ability to actually be able to enforce it with fidelity.
Gabe Albornoz, thank you.
Absolutely.
You don't know what it's like to be cared for. She's got all the answers to you as
The Mungunion is a satirical blog run by Rockville resident Glenn Fellman that started in 2023. In the last few months, Fellman has published some non-satirical reporting on his blog and has asked to be able to join the county council president's weekly press briefings to ask questions. But the council has denied his request because his blog is primarily satire. Fellman has raised First Amendment concerns.
I want the same access that any other reporter from any other news agency would have. Last December, I was working on a piece and I saw an announcement that Kate Stewart was having a media availability related to the topic I was working on. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity. I'll join the media availability and I'll ask a question that I have, which I didn't know the answer to, and which would have really been relevant to the topic she was discussing. And so without really thinking much of it, I made a request through her staff person and was, surprised when I got a denial. And I had a legitimate question, which would have fed into, a story I was working on. I wasn't there to troll. I wasn't there to, interrupt things. I had a question as a person who, puts out information to the public. And so that's how it all started. And I asked again a few months later. I was rejected. And with the rejections, I got, the first time I just got a boilerplate paragraph that said no and told me how to join the YouTube video. And then later I got more detailed explanations, which didn't really make sense to me, but I left it be until the Mungunion started to become more evolved and started publishing a lot more straight news. And I made some changes to the site to segregate the satire and non-satire. And at that point, I felt that, I really had a legitimate claim to attend these events, but I've still been rejected.
So the access you're looking for is being able to ask a question.
I want to be able to ask a question at the press conference with everybody else. Okay. Because what I've found is that if I email any member of the council or their staff with a question, I may not hear back at all. I will likely have to make phone calls and follow-up emails to get them to respond. And it's not in the timely manner that someone who's working on a press report, can handle.
Why were you denied? What did they say?
They said that because the Mungunion has a majority of content that is satirical, we don't meet the definition of a media outlet. I guess in their minds, you have to have a greater concentration of real news to satirical stories. I've written back a very strong letter. Waiting for a response to get some details as to specifically what criteria I don't meet and why, and how their criteria measure up to case law, because I think that they're going too far. I think that they're putting out subjective criteria, which, Supreme Court rulings in Maryland Constitution don't allow.
You started the Mungunion as a purely satirical website. Was it 3 years ago, you said?
The first articles were in January 2023.
When did you start to change the tenor of the website?
About a year ago. And the problem was that when people read the stories, they didn't believe them because it was the Mungunion. Eventually, I started to tag and put publisher's notes and really try to get people to understand, some things are satire and some things are not.
You can't blame them. You create a brand that is satirical, and then you go, no, it's not satirical anymore.
Oh, yeah, I'm the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah, you put a crocodile in the Glenmont Shopping Center or something, right?
No, I put signs warning people of frozen alligator attack that would attack them in parks throughout Montgomery County. And that cost me $50 with a uniform civil citation from the park police.
Why did you do that? It's one thing to do satire on a website, another thing.
It wasn't satirical at all. It was just a prank.
Are your pranks combined with your satire on the website itself giving you a reputation such that folks would go, you can't take him seriously? And then you go, no, now take me seriously.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely happened.
Your identity was not known when you were doing the Mungunion. Nobody knew this was Glenn Fellman.
That was true when I started. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure where I was going, what I was doing, and I was putting out some things that were not only ridiculous things, but controversial things.
What controversial things?
Some of my graphics, especially, I guess one of the good ones was with respect to White Oak and development in White Oak and the Viva project. And I made a picture of Mark Elric walking through the Kulon walled city in Hong Kong, which is, the most densely populated city in the world. And I said that was going to be what the new, White Oak development was going to look like.
I got to say, I love Kowloon in Hong Kong. So what would you say is the balance between satire and non-satire right now?
It's very heavily satire. It's 90 to 10. When I made my last request to the county, to join a media briefing, I wrote a long letter to Sonia Healy and Kate Stewart, and I explained the evolution, and I provided an explanation as to how it evolved. I gave them links to 2 articles that I thought were good examples of real news. One was a story of a state delegate whose car was seen driving recklessly and how the Mungunyan had identified who it was and then interviewed him and published the interview. And the other one was relating to the flag for the city of Rockville, which we identified as having Confederate symbolism. And it's never had a conversation. There's never been a public conversation about that.
Both those stories come about only in 2025 in like May and June.
Right. When I wrote to Kate and Sonia, I explained the evolution. I explained that we had gone back and tagged articles, satire versus non-satire, that I had updated the about page to be more transparent. And so I delivered them a compelling argument as to why the Mungunyan should now be allowed into the media pool. I got the same denial that I had received back in December.
Generally, satire websites don't have credentials to attend, say, the White House press briefings.
You don't think the Daily Show would get in?
I don't know if they would get in or not get in, but they're not there.
I did some research, and the Daily Show could get in, and so could probably The Onion.
The legal question here is actually very, very interesting. Satirical websites historically have been denied access. Obviously, the New York Times publishes cartoons from time to time that are satirical. Washington Post does the same. Newspapers do, in fact, have satirical content, and they are in press briefings everywhere. Do you have a sense of what that balance ought to be?
Traditionally, they would have been denied. When the Trump administration started, Carolyn Leavitt came out, and one of the first announcements she made was that they were changing up things in the press pool. One of the things that she said would be different was that the Trump administration would be allowing podcasters and influencers and other people who have an effect on media and who deliver news or information into their press briefings. And they have, in fact, done that. The way that they framed this change, to me, made a lot of sense. And I think it should be true of all government agencies. It's a recognition that people don't get their news from watching 4 TV stations. That's how it was 25 years ago, because that's all there was. But now there are billions, literally billions of places for them to get information.
There's a question of whether you're expecting Montgomery County to follow the Trump White House in this respect, the political question, but leave that aside for a minute. This ban that you are facing from council media briefings, it's good for you, right?
It's good for me from the standpoint that a lot of people are learning about the Mungunyan who didn't know about the Mungunyan. A lot of people who did know about the Mungunyan are learning that we do real news as well and entertainment. It's not good for me in that it delegitimizes, is that a word? The Mungunyan. You know, it makes us not be a legitimate news source in the eyes of the county.
So as an anti-establishmentarian, you're looking for the blessing of the establishment to or legitimacy?
How ironic is that?
Why do you care what they think?
Oh, I don't care what they think. I want to know what they're doing. And the best way to know what they're doing is to be at their events and ask them to their face.
Are you looking for a quick resolution, or do you want this to drag on, grow your audience as a consequence, put on more muscle?
No, I don't want us to drag on. It's stressful and it's distracting, and I have other things I want to do.
If they don't give in, what's your plan? Are you going to go to court?
I might.
Do you have any plans to change the content balance between satire and news stories?
Absolutely not.
Glenn Feldman, good luck in your First Amendment fight.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that come out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program, at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from DC area roots band, The Longtimers. Tom Clifford on vocals and guitar, Ben Holmes on drums and vocals, Mo Nelson on upright bass and vocals, and Pete Rose on guitars and vocals. You can find them at Hank Dietl's Tavern on Rockville Pike and other musical establishments in the area. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.